Hi, welcome to the show. If you're a new listener, thanks for listening. Stephanie McCullough is my guest today, and Stephanie helps professional women reduce financial stress by aligning their money story with their deepest held values. She founded Sofia Financial in 2011 after 14 years as a financial advisor, with the goal to empower women to make wise financial decisions, address their areas of money stress, and free up their time and mental energy to spend on the things that are truly important. In addition to creating more ease in life for her clients, Stephanie enjoys speaking about the human side of money and rational finance. Let's talk to Stephanie now. Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being with me.
Thanks, Jan. I'm excited.
Me too. The listeners have just heard your bio, so they know a little bit about who you are. But I wanted to read one specific phrase from your LinkedIn profile because it's so perfect that I didn't want to miss one word. And it says, and I quote, Stephanie McCullough, helping professional women reduce financial stress by aligning their money story with their deepest held values. That is so beautiful. How did you so concisely come up with that? Those two lines, I guess.
I guess it's a product of a lifetime, really, right? I mean, definitely my experience as a financial advisor, and I've been doing this for 21 years, a little bit more than that. Not always kind of on my own with my own business focus, but, you know, I really saw so many women that were impacted by financial stress. And, you know, I think I've read articles about how women tend to hold things differently than men, right? They might kind of take on self-blame for certain circumstances, whereas men might assign blame elsewhere. Giant generalizations, but you know, as I delved more and more into financial planning, I really thought kind of what was missing from the general conversation and from the industry kind of narratives about money was this connection to your whole life and to how financial topics really do impact everything else. And if we're stressed about the money, it gets in the way of living as fully as we possibly can. So those exact words took a long time to hone down and get right. But I think it does a fairly good job of capturing what I'm trying to do.
Well, it concisely says so much that I really honed in on myself when I was looking at your profile and your bio and your website, which is also packed full of wonderful, wonderful information. And I'd like to go back to the beginning of your story, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay. So what I'm really curious about is why and how you got interested in money as a vehicle in your life.
You know, it's the path always looks clear looking backwards, right? But looking forwards, it wouldn't have been clear. It's kind of ironic because I grew up never wanting to do what my father did. And then 21 years ago, my husband and I were thinking about starting a family and moving back to the Philadelphia area. And he got a job offer. And I thought, what on earth could I do? I guess I could go work with my dad. So not only did I move back to the same school district where I grew up, I started working with my father. And I've turned into my parents. Not exactly. But, you know, it really, for quite a while, it was a struggle because my father went to Wharton. He's got an MBA. He's a natural born salesman. I am not any of those things. So it definitely felt like kind of a round peg in a square hole or a square peg in a round hole for a while. And I actually sat next to an executive coach, first coach I've ever met besides sports coach, at a Chamber of Commerce event. And he said, oh, you know, you might need some coaching. And I kind of poo-pooed it because I hadn't really heard about it. I did a sample call with him and I thought, oh yes, I so need this help because I was trying to figure out how I could do this work if I wasn't like my father. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, I discovered kind of a whole area called financial life planning, which really is much more the soft stuff, the people stuff, as opposed to just the hard numbers and investment stuff. And that's kind of when I thought, oh, I could do it a different way than my father. So fortunately, I didn't come into the industry through a path like so many have to, where from day one, you have to pick up the phone and call everybody you've ever met and try to sell them something. I would have lasted 25 minutes in that type of situation. It would have been a disaster. But fortunately, my father had quite a few companies that he worked with doing retirement plans and that kind of thing. So I could get my feet wet, meeting with people one-on-one, talking about their personal situations and money with no sales pressure at all. So the combination of that experience with discovering this kind of other approach to money really is when I started to think, oh, this is exciting. I can do this work. And it's meaningful and it's making a difference in the world.
Oh, it absolutely is. And the name of your company, as I read earlier, is Sofia Financial. And you appear to, I don't know of many other firms. If there are any, I apologize to any listeners who might be owners of them. But I don't personally know of many other firms who bridge that unique niche of combining the mindset, overcoming the money mindset, and the practical skills. We've had guests this month on the show that are specialists in the mindset, but you have the bridge of the mindset and the practical. And I don't know of other companies that do that. How did you come to, well, first, does Sofia have a significance? Does the name itself have a significance with that?
It does. I had a really terrible working title for the business, which was the Women's Financial Resource Group, which sounded so kind of stuffy and masculine. And I was meeting with a branding consultant. And the day before, I kind of had a panic moment. I thought, I need a better name. And I emailed a few trusted friends. And 2 people suggested Sofia. My friend who's half Greek, because it means wisdom in Greek. Mm-hmm. And my friend who teaches medieval history, because she said it's the ancient incarnation of feminine wisdom. I thought, ooh, that sounds good. So that's why I went with it.
Oh, that's beautiful. And do you find what I really thought was so lovely also is you're very clear with what you offer, how you offer it, and how to go forward. Mm-hmm. Because when you were mentioning how, I don't know if actually you said this or I got it from my reading about your firm and your offerings, but with money, there's a lot of confusion, with if there is a quagmire of what to do, taking the next step obviously isn't going to be clear. So on your website, it's very clear. You have a question about this, here's what we do, here's how to go forward. Coming to those decision points, how did you know that women were the way you wanted to go forward yourself?
Yeah, it was so interesting. One of the retirement plans I took a large role in the beginning of my experience as a financial advisor with my dad's company was I was in charge of the retirement plan at a hospital. So I would meet with the executives at the hospital, not too many women, but also one-on-one with any employee who wanted to learn about the retirement plan. And it's amazing, like over 80% of the employees at a hospital are women. Some physicians, most of the nurses, lots of the technician people, and then, kind of the folks who make the place run were a majority women. So I had a lot of conversations that really made me think there's got to be a better way to make this an approachable topic. That I feel like part of it is that we get this message from society that investments is a man's game. It's really, women don't do that so much. And I've heard horrible stories of women trying to meet with other professionals in my industry, not to cast aspersions, but, trying to find an advisor to work with. And she brought her husband along. The one particular story I'm thinking about, she brought her husband along as a second set of ears. And 7 out of 10 people she met with, the advisor spoke to her husband, even though it's her money. Right? So, we get these messages. So part of it was wanting to make it a topic that feels relevant and important and doable, right? I really do believe that everyone can make wise financial decisions, and you know most of the information you need to know. I'm just kind of the guide in a foreign land. Like, I speak the lingo, I know what the different tools are that we can use, but I can't do anything without really an in-depth conversation with the client about what they're trying to do, what type of journey they're trying to have. And it's the collaboration of putting those two pieces together which lets us make some good decisions.
Do you end up teaching a lot? Teaching your clients?
Yeah, teaching, explaining. A lot of my clients really do want to feel more informed. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily want to know every gyration of the stock market, which is a good thing. But they want to, kind of feel like they could do this on their own if they need to, which I think is totally, a big part of, if I'm trying to empower women to make wise financial decisions, that's a big piece of it, kind of try to take some of the mystery away.
Mm-hmm. And especially one of your offerings is the actual plan. And I was wondering in that, once you are helping somebody with their plan, if there's the fear around that, teaching them how to get away from that fear. I wondered if that was part of the teaching part. That was where my question was coming from also.
I think so. I think there's a lot of kind of layers of fear around money. One is just facing the situation and taking that step of, so many women come to me and they say, I just want to make sure I'm being smart about it. Right? There's some nagging thing that they know they should be paying attention to, but they haven't been. I cannot get them to the point where they're ready to have the conversation, mm-hmm. right? I mean, you kind of have to get financially naked in front of me, and mm-hmm. people have to be ready to take that step and feel comfortable doing that. So that's one fear point. And then, the other point, a lot of women come in with this fear. Again, I feel like it's, kind of enforced by our culture. People have a fear of becoming a bag lady. We don't even use that term anymore in our world, but women are like, they're terrified of eating cat food and living on the street. So many times it's kind of getting the first few steps and looking at the actual situation and, there's just such relief. Like, okay, at the bare minimum, I'll be able to keep a roof over my head. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there are a lot of fears, and a lot of also, I think, shame and self-blame, which is totally misplaced.
Mm-hmm. It's very empowering, like you said. Yeah. It is interesting, the fears that are around money. I think of money as an interesting thing. I think of almost everything in our life as symbols, that give us lessons. And money is one of what I consider a master symbol. There's a few of them, but money is one of them. It's like this giant neon, where if we allow it, it can really show us so much about ourselves and our life. But
I think that's so true.
Do you ever work with men, or is it just women?
I do. About half my clients are women on their own for whatever reason, never married, divorced, widowed. And then maybe half my clients are couples, where the woman kind of was the one going out and finding someone to work with. Or sometimes the man wants to make sure that if he's gone first, the woman feels taken care of. I have quite a few couples who are both women. I don't want to, indicate that they're all male-female couples. Mm-hmm. I've got a couple of individual men that I work with. And really, to me, as long as you're okay with kind of my approach and my, kind of touchy-feely process, then I'm fine. It's just, it's not the end result that's going to be different. We're not going to end up necessarily with a different investment portfolio than a male advisor might, but it's the conversation and how we get there. That's right. The different part.
And I was curious about your insight over how men and women view money differently and how they process it differently. What can you share about that without obviously betraying any confidences?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of good research on this too, and I devour whenever I see studies about it. It is very interesting how women view money, and I think they see it much more as a tool. for doing something in their lives, for creating something for their families, for assuring that they'll be secure and not a burden to their children in their old age. There is some research around women in charitable giving. And, when men give, they're much more likely to want their name on a plaque or on the wing of the hospital. Whereas women will often give anonymously unless they believe that by putting their name out there, they'll be a model to others and prompt others to give. And then in international development work, what people have discovered is that if you assist the women to become financially stable, there's ripple effects, right? They make sure their kids go to school. They make sure their community is in a better situation. Whereas men tend to use it for a little bit more, personal needs.
So when women have the empowerment through money, they are actually literally improving the world through the vehicle of their money.
I believe so. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. And I see recently much more around the topic of money in our culture. And we're in, North America, the United States. Do you see differences? Are you in an opportunity to see differences in different cultures with attitudes financially?
Oh, that's an interesting question. From a regulatory perspective, I'm only allowed to work with clients in the U.S.
Okay.
But I do have clients who have grown up in other places and are now U.S. residents. I think there's so many things that are taboo to talk about in our society that are maybe a little bit more open in other cultures, but I'm not sure money is one of them. I think money is, it's still kind of that last taboo topic. People talk about religion and sex more often, but you don't talk about money. It's just not polite. And women learn so often by sharing their stories. Mm-hmm. So if we can't talk to our friends about the money stuff, and we're not taught in school, and our families didn't necessarily share with us about it, how on earth are we supposed to know this stuff and feel confident about it?
It's true. What do you think that ties back to? Do you think it's out of those things that you named? Do you think it's the shame? Do you think it's the fear? What do you have a thought over what that might be from? Why
there's a taboo about talking about it? I feel like, again, it's kind of a message. I mean, my family told me it wasn't polite to talk about money. I never knew how much money my parents made. I was told not to ask my friends. You definitely didn't do that. I think maybe it's changing generationally, but I don't know.
I agree. I mean, same. I was raised the same. The three taboo subjects were money, sex, and religion, right?
Yep.
And within certain groups of girlfriends, I think now we're all attempting to speak more openly, but there's still a little more reservation, I feel.
Yes.
And I don't know. I wonder what it is. I don't know.
I think a lot of it is comparison too, right? Always comparing ourselves to others. So, if you look around the neighborhood and everyone has really nice cars and they all send their kids to private school, you make assumptions about what's going on in their bank account. And if, you're in, I always say, don't compare, and I borrowed this from someone. I did not coin it myself. Don't compare your insides to someone else's outsides.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Whether that's kind of, what's going on in your brain or what's going on in your bank account. You really have no idea if those folks have a good balance in their retirement plan, or if they've got their emergency fund, or if they're drowning in debt. And with social media now, it's different too, right? I mean, it's more in our faces. Oh, they're taking a fabulous vacation to the Caribbean. They must be totally fine financially. Well, I can tell you, that's not always true.
Exactly. And and I do think, from my perspective of working with people, I think sometimes that does come back to shame, and trying to cover for our own human insecurities. So maybe that will be the last frontier of our development as a culture, being able to get over that cultural shame and talk about
that'd be great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's cross that one as our next goal, huh? Cultural.
I would love it. Yep.
What I'm really curious. I'm just picturing you as a little Stephanie, as a young Stephanie. Were you good with did you get an allowance? Were you taught money skills?
Was I taught? I was definitely, it was beaten into my head that debt was evil and debt was bad and you never,
yeah.
and I got a credit card pretty early on because I studied abroad even in high school, I went on a little trip. So I think I might've gotten my credit card then. I mean, obviously it was on my parents, but you never use more than you could pay off, immediately. But besides that, I definitely, I don't think I got a regular allowance. I feel like sometimes there was allowance and sometimes there wasn't. So it wasn't very predictable. I definitely remember, having my first job and getting a paycheck and being like, oh, okay, there's this money that I can decide what to do with. But I don't know that I was very good about, putting it away for the future. I kind of was more like, more will come in.
Was there a point where it shifted, where you saw the real potential of, and maybe it was at that point where you were talking about working with your dad and seeing the opportunity there, or maybe it was something else, but was there a point where you felt, and I really mean felt the potential shift with money for you personally?
One thing that comes to mind is when I had after graduate school, I worked for the federal government, and there is a generous match on their retirement plan. They call it the thrift savings plan instead of the 401k or the 403b. But just seeing, even I think my first statement where, the money I put in and the government put in almost as much as I did, and being like, oh, wow. So they're giving me that incentive to save for my future, but I've almost doubled my money before it's even invested. That was a really exciting. Like, I knew theoretically that you're supposed to do that, but seeing that statement with those dollars on there, that made a big impact.
Yeah. So and are you a visual person? Was it the visual that made the difference also?
I am a visual person. Yes, I think so.
Mm-hmm. Do you use that with your clients also, the visual of their portfolios and their plans and such?
I hadn't really put the connection together. I definitely ask clients, though, kind of what's going to work for them, right? If we've got a certain goal, what is going to work? Is it somehow reminders? Is it, is it something visual? Is it putting a sticky note in front of you with, reminding your goals? So I do believe that there's no one size fits all with that kind of stuff. So trying to work with them to figure out, how not to get sidetracked on the way to the goal. I believe it's a very personal answer.
Yeah, that's really true. It is, isn't it? Do you have a story you could share about the most impactful memory you have about money, either just a general story or with a client, unnamed or something, but a really impactful money story?
I have a client who came to me several years after a divorce. She had a good job, but, things were tight. She wasn't getting much support from her ex. And she, she was saving for retirement. She was doing other things, but she was able to fund a renovation to their home. So she's in a very good school district, but kind of a smaller home on a, not the nicest street. But she was able to fund a renovation, a new kitchen, and, a second floor master bedroom. And the pride that she felt, she said, I did this by myself through my hard work and through my, financial skills. It really was amazing to see that and to kind of, bear witness to that. And it really also reinforced my thought that I don't bring any judgment to how people use their money, right? I'm not going to tell you, oh, that's a bad idea, you shouldn't do that. That was important to her. And she created this lovely atmosphere for her family and her kids to grow up in. That's awesome. She sacrificed other things on the way there, but really she was so excited and felt such a sense of accomplishment. I loved being a part of that.
Yeah, I can feel it as you're saying it. I can just imagine what that would have been like. Yeah. And as you say that, it also strikes me, I'm thinking of individuals who may think that they're not able to work with money because they have very little or what they would consider none. I've heard people say, well, I don't have any money to manage.
Exactly.
How would you respond to that impression or attitude or thought?
I think part of it comes from my industry, from the investment industry, and there are people out there who only work with high net worth individuals, right? I mean, oh, you don't have enough money to invest with me. Investments is a very small part of our financial lives, right? So money management is not just how I'm going to invest my money for retirement. It's cash flow. It's dealing with debt. It's figuring out the best way to set up your safety net, for what if something bad happens. Insurance is a big piece of it. Making sure that you take advantage of your employee benefits. There's a lot of different pieces. It's not just what can you write a check for to invest in some fund.
And I saw on your website that one of your offerings is actually helping people make decisions, which I thought was brilliant because I often think there's a paralysis that comes with money fear.
Yes.
Like, what do I do? I don't know whether, the word drama would be too dramatic to use, but there does seem to be a drama around money sometimes, because it appears to be like a life or death decision. I make the wrong decision, I'm destitute, I'm a bag lady, I have nothing. I make the right decision, life is perfect, everything's good, all my problems are answered.
Yes.
And whether that's true or not, I don't believe it is, but there does seem to often have that sense of drama to a decision with money. And there's probably a grayness in there. There's some truth to it, maybe has more truth than not. But anyway.
I think you're right, though, because it feels, life or death. And very often that leads to some paralysis and just avoiding the decision, the head in the sand approach, like, oh, I'll deal with it next month when I have the energy. Mm-hmm. When in reality, a big part of when you asked if I teach people, I think part of my kind of education mission is to show that there are trade-offs to every decision. There's no magic answer. Everything you do, even putting money in a safe savings account at the bank, has a trade-off, right? It's not going to grow very fast. So going in eyes wide open and taking a look at all the potential routes, and then making the decision that best lines up with the job for that money, right? It's all about what do you want that money to do for you or for somebody else? Mm-hmm. And then trying to figure out the best way to line the money up to do that. Everything has trade-offs. So there's no perfect answer. So I think sometimes even just starting the conversation mm-hmm. lets women kind of tamp down the fear and the paralysis and realize they know more than they think they do.
Yeah. And there's actually and you probably do know this, when we make decisions, it's actually a very healthy thing for our brain. It releases very positive neurotransmitters and our brain is very, very happy. So just making a decision propels us forward into a healthy place.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I am fascinated by the science of the brain and how it impacts money.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So while perhaps I hate to use the word wrong decision, but as you said, everything's a trade-off. And I was thinking of that example of the woman who applied her money for her goal. That did mean she had to give up other things, but Absolutely. It was well worth it in her mind, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
What would be some things that for our listeners of all types of wealth, and even if they're not thinking of themselves as having wealth, mm-hmm. what would be some points you would like everyone to know about your approach towards money? Just how you believe about money, your thoughts and beliefs on money.
Yeah, I really feel like there's a lot of stuff out there in the world that we don't have to worry about and you don't have to know. When you talk about women feeling kind of paralyzed and like they don't know enough to make a decision, mm-hmm. we really don't have to know how the stock market works to make a good decision. You really don't have to know what the economy is going to do or what the stock market's going to do in the future. Spoiler alert, nobody knows. Nobody can predict that stuff. Lots of people make lots of money trying to predict it, but no one can predict it. So the most important things to know to me are really internal looking. What is most important to you? What are your core values? What kind of life would you like to lead? A lot of people would like to be able to stop working in their current job and work for a nonprofit or do something that they have a lot of passion about, but wouldn't bring in as much money. Mm-hmm. Is that what you want to do? Awesome, right? Then we work with what you have to try to figure out how that works. Another thing that I'm really fascinated by is, sometimes we think we want stuff, mm-hmm. like a beach house. I really want a beach house so that my grandkids can come and we can have wonderful memories. Okay, what if we took the beach house part out of that? You want a place that your grandkids could come and make wonderful memories. There's other ways to do that besides buying a beach house and running the risk of giant storms or, flooding or, all that kind of stuff. If you get at the feelings, what you really want to feel and create in life, then we can get creative about how to get there.
I love that. That is so powerful. It's also extremely reassuring. As you were talking, I was thinking that's how you're taking the fear away. It's reassuring all of those fears that there really isn't a sound fact underneath those fears. Just not having to worry about how the world is because we have no control is a fundamental reassurance.
Exactly. Focusing on what we can control. There was a statistic that I loved. It seems so obvious once you say it out loud, but I think a lot of people would be surprised by it. There was a study on retirement plans, 401k plans, and it found that the single biggest factor determining your balance at the end of your career was how much you put in, which is totally in our control. It wasn't which mutual fund you picked. It wasn't, how often you changed your funds. It was how much you put in. That has a way bigger impact.
And it is interesting. Yeah. What is your biggest goal?
I really want to expand my impact. I want to help as many women as possible feel confident about money because I do feel, like you said, that it makes the world a better place. Mm-hmm. So finding ways to expand what I can do. I do kind of have a secret vision for world domination of having a bunch of women advisors working with lots of women clients. I love speaking to groups. So if I can get a room full of women and share some of this information about how the brain works and about, kind of demystifying the whole process, I can see the shoulders in the room kind of go, oh, it's not my fault that maybe I'm in this situation, right? Letting go some of the shame and blame. I love doing that. That's very exciting. Just finding ways to kind of spread the word.
I'd love to hear more about your idea for world domination. Those women advisors, are they part of Sofia Financial in your view?
Someday, I'm hoping. Yeah.
How exciting. Yeah. So the way that you're set up now, are you working with clients all over the country?
I am.
Okay.
Yep.
So they're not all in person.
Correct.
Okay.
We do Zoom meetings just like this, and I have quite a few clients I've never met in person.
Okay. So that's very good for listeners to know also, because I'm going to have all the links on the show notes, and it's so well explained and you're so accessible. Your services are so accessible and helpful that I encourage anybody who's curious to take a look and see. Even looking is reassuring. It will make everybody who has anxiety's shoulders just go, oh.
Thank you. I did try hard to kind of be accessible and to feel not like a stuffy investment bank, but, like a place that people would want to come.
Yeah. Now, how do you do work? Because a lot of women are still part of a couple. Mm-hmm. And if it's not a same-sex couple, but a mixed couple, how does that work for you with clients? Because you're working mostly with women. How
Right.
do you work with those clients?
Yeah, in several different ways. You've seen on the website, but just to kind of share with listeners, I really have tried to structure my services to be a whole menu, from a one-time 90-minute session to just answer a few questions to an ongoing, relationship that may or may not involve investments. I don't believe in investment minimums. So for quite a few women who were in couples, I have started out kind of just on the, almost like a consulting role, like a sitting down and trying to get their arms around what the picture looks like. Sometimes the spouse comes, sometimes not, but we can look at, the numbers, what is there? A big part of a lot of people want to know, do I have enough? Will I have enough?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is always, it depends, right? What's it for? What do you need it for? So a big piece is trying to get clear on living expenses. If we're talking about retirement, when maybe there's no more earned income coming in, or maybe it's much smaller than currently, knowing what that, kind of monthly amount is that you need to take care of yourself. That's a key piece. And I don't have that answer. Mm-hmm. So, helping clients see the value of looking at that information, and then also trying to take away the judgment, right? There's no judgment. Just look at where the money goes. Most people don't know where all their money goes. So I've worked with women in relationships to kind of think that through. And then, what might happen, if I'm on my own, right? Because most women live longer than men, or they live longer than their marriage does. So, we're able to kind of put our arms around that. And then sometimes, the man comes along too, and we do the whole picture, and we do the investments, and that's fine too.
And I do think that is one of the fears that women have, that I hear about, that we do live longer, and that if we are in a couple, we will be the survivor. And what do we do? And I don't know if it's still true, but in the past, it was the case that some women weren't even aware of how to handle their finances.
It's still true.
Is it? Okay. So then there's that whole learning curve of, what is this? What is this account? What does this even mean?
Right. Wow. And to do that at the time of emotional distress, after a divorce or after, being widowed, just adds to the burden. So if you can kind of get your arms around things beforehand, at a time when maybe, we're able to be a little bit more, and I was going to say rational, and I'm not trying to say that people are irrational, but, again, the research shows that in a time of high emotions, that part kind of takes over, and the rational brain, has a harder time kicking in, which is just fact, right? Again, no judgment.
It's a trauma that the brain just has to heal. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I've dealt with quite a few widows. It is a terrible time.
It is. It's and I am, just as a side thing, I'm thinking of that piece of women and the guilt, where we like to spend money on what we like to spend, whether it's face cream or beauty treatments or clothes or whatever, and that no judgment in our financial advisor for being able to feel fine about, this is the plan, this is what I'm going to spend on because this is what I want, without any judgment. That's a real relief. That's where the shoulders go down, and it's like, yeah, this is where I'm spending my money because it's important to me.
And I might be the one coming back to say, okay, that's great, spend it here, but we can't spend more than there is, right? Or if we spend at this level, you're more likely to run out of money sooner. So, that's the kind of reality check I bring. But where the actual dollars go, I'm happy to help look at that with folks. But, at the end, they're deciding. It's their money. It's so terrible. I have one widow client whom I adore, and she had several male advisors after her husband passed away. And then through a mutual friend, she came to me. And in our first conversation, I said things like, well, it's your money. And she said, oh, no one's ever said that to me before. She was being shamed for spending money, which is ridiculous in my opinion. She's got a good amount of money. She's fine.
Yeah. There are lots of things that we have an opportunity to really change in our culture. And I'm so thrilled that you're at the forefront of helping change this with money. Thank you. It's a wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a big message I would want to get out there, that you are not stuck with whatever advisor you've got, right? My clients, they can leave any day of the week. You can leave. I mean, there's some rare cases where maybe an old trust document was written where you have to stay with a certain bank. But other than that, you can walk out that door and go somewhere else.
Yeah. Who inspires you? Who or what inspires you?
Oh, I do have people who really inspire me. I love Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love.
Yep.
She had a podcast series a while back in connection with her book, Big Magic.
Mm-hmm.
It was called Magic Lessons. And even though I am not in a creative field, I do consider myself a creative person, but I can't paint or sing worth the lick. But I loved the conversations she would have with folks who felt kind of stuck in some creative endeavor. And she'd give them some advice. And often it was kind of inward looking type of assignments. And then she'd go talk to one of her friends like Brene Brown or somebody else fabulous to get other advice. And then she'd come back and check in with the person later. I just love those conversations and being privy to that type of encouragement, way of thinking about creativity and about putting our work into the world. Mm-hmm. That stuff is exciting.
You're a good writer. I really enjoyed your posts.
Oh, thank you.
Your most recent one is on how yoga, and please correct me if I'm misquoting, but it's on yoga and money and how they're connected. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And we're taping this ahead of when this will air. This will air in March. So you may have a post in between the time that we air, but that's the post that's most recent at the time that we're taping. I really like that post. You're very good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who else inspires you?
Oh, goodness. Pennsylvania used to be run by the governor, and now it's run by a private company. But every year they have the Pennsylvania Conference for Women, mm-hmm. and every year it grows. So last year it was like 12,000 women in a room. And Michelle Obama was the keynote speaker. And I love her approach to life. I haven't read her new book yet. I'm very excited to. Just kind of the grace she brought to that really difficult position and living in the bubble and the view of everybody. She's so real, and being a mom, and that ability to be yourself and also handle kind of whatever comes at you, that I find very inspiring.
I haven't read her book yet either. I read a very good excerpt on why she decided to use a stylist. Did you?
Oh, no, I didn't.
It was in one of the fashion magazines. So, it was widely published. It was wonderful. And it was in response to some criticism that she had read and was hurt by, understandably. Mm-hmm. And knew that it was the first that she really realized she was going to become scrutinized as a spokesperson, and saw the gravity of her role.
Oof, I can't imagine. I would not want to be in that spot.
But what I thought was really lovely was the way she took it to heart, and she thought, oh yeah, that's right. And she was, and is in a public place and really did have that role. But some may not have taken it to heart, and she did. And the way she wrote about it was both very human, personal, but also very professional and well done. So I can only imagine the book is as good and similarly approached. I would enjoy that. Yeah. Yeah. So very cool. What do you feel is indispensable in your work?
Ooh. Yeah. Questions.
Interesting. That's indispensable in my work too.
Because I don't know the answers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do know some gentlemen in my field who know what you need before you walk in the room. I disagree. I've even been in the room with several of them and wanted to kick them under the table, like, be quiet, let them speak. I'm
trying not to laugh too hard. That's hilarious. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and I also, you know, I tell women a lot when I do my public speaking, especially, I say, you know, you don't have to know all the answers about the money stuff. You have to know the questions to ask and have the guts to ask them. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not, sometimes it might be embarrassing to admit that you don't know the answers, but I feel like as we get older, we hopefully get over that to some extent. But I've been in situations talking to women who had a financial product that someone sold them. And I would ask, okay, well, you know, why did your advisor recommend this? Why did you guys decide this was a good idea? Oh, I don't know. Right. Just to ask the questions. If something's bugging you, ask the questions. And when I'm talking to a client, I warn them, I'm like, I'm going to ask more questions than you do, because I want to make sure that we're really coming up with a plan that captures what you want.
Do you see your clients asking more questions as they become more empowered as you work with them?
That's an interesting point. It's almost the opposite, because once we've come up with the strategy and the plan, they kind of get it and they know, and we're working the plan and moving forward. They do ask questions about maybe things outside, you know, of what we've talked about. Hey, this opportunity's come up, or this, you know, kind of windfall has come in. What should we do with it? Mm-hmm. And I always say it depends, you know, when we talk it through. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. So what would you like to add or say that I haven't asked you?
Oh, that's a good one. I think it's maybe just reinforcing this idea of trying to find a way to leave this self-judgment aside, because we all have things on our to-do list that have fallen to the bottom for a very long time. And then we feel guilty that we haven't dealt with them. And then we feel guilty that we didn't deal with them 6 months ago. So it just, even opening the folder or whatever it might be, brings up all that shame. Mm-hmm. So if we can kind of find a way, and I'm not pretending I'm perfect in this area myself, but part of my role is to help people, you know, put that aside, and we're working from here forward. We're not looking back and bashing ourselves about what might have happened. It's really, you know, okay, where are we right now today? And what do I want to do moving forward? I think it really kind of goes along with this kind of cultural moment we're in, talking about mindfulness and being intentional. If we can be mindful of our money and what comes in and what goes out, where we're putting it, and do it with intention, as opposed to, you know, kind of by habit or these automatic monthly subscriptions that get you, you know, if we can be more intentional, I feel like that is the empowering role. Mm-hmm. We are then aligning our money with our values. So you can get to a great place. It just takes a little bit of self-forgiveness.
That's wonderful. Thank you for adding that. With all of those beautiful messages, I'm wondering what of those, if any, and more, do you like to speak about most? Because you mentioned you enjoy speaking.
You know, I really like talking about what I call the human side of money, which brings in the research about behavioral finance. You know, in traditional economics, it was assumed that human beings, there's actually a term, the rational man. And of course they say man, but it assumes that human beings very coolly weigh the pros and cons of every financial decision and then move forward doing the thing that's in their own best interest. But we don't do that about anything else. Why would we do that about money? So there was actually a Nobel Prize awarded to a psychologist and an economist together who brought these insights that, oh, human beings are emotional about money. And actually we do irrational things in a very predictable way. There's a great book called Predictably Irrational. So it's not that each of us is just stupid about money. It's the way our brains are wired, and we make assumptions, we take shortcuts, and that often leads to bad money decisions. So when I share some of that information with an audience, it's such an aha moment, like, oh, that's why I think this way, or that's why I have a tendency to want to do A, B, or C. And it's not a character flaw. It's biological. It's our wiring. So, and then, some tricks on how to work with that reality and put things in place that work to our advantage. That's the fun stuff that I like to share.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And I know that also is on your website, and I'll have it as a separate entry on the show notes as well. So it'll really stand out.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a true pleasure. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I love that you're doing this focus on women and money.
Me too. It's really exciting. There's so much information to get out there, and there does seem to be a real interest around the topic right now. So I think that our culture is ready for it.
Excellent.
And that's exciting.
Yes.
So let's talk again and see where our culture has moved.
That's great. I would love that.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Jan.
My guest today is Lesley Jane Seymour. Many of you may know her from her acclaimed career in magazine publishing, where she established herself as one of the industry's, if not one of our culture's, most respected leaders. Her experience in the media industry began early. Before her leading roles as editor-in-chief, she worked as beauty director of Glamour and senior editor at Vogue. She went on to be editor-in-chief of Marie Claire, Redbook, and YM. Under her leadership, they were all reshaped and transformed into something not only bigger, but greater. Most recently, until February 2016, she served as editor-in-chief of More magazine, where she notably won hundreds of awards and created history by having First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, guest edit an entire issue. Beyond print, she used information and education she had access to at the magazines to call attention to issues that impact women around the world. Just a few of the programs she became involved in include domestic violence. She spearheaded Time to Talk Day in Congress to raise awareness, One World, One Wish for international relief campaign Save the Children, World Food Program. She brought Drew Barrymore to Kenya to shine a spotlight on the issue of rising hunger and the barriers to education for girls. Domestic violence in the Latino community. She took the Marie Claire magazine team to walk alongside with Salma Hayek down the Washington Mall. And she traveled to Japan and Cambodia with First Lady Michelle Obama to cover the launch of Let Girls Learn, Obama's program to help girls around the world get a better education. And that's just a glimmer of her past professional background. As for what she's doing now, we're going to talk to her about that. But she's taken her expertise, knowledge, and experience and established Covey Club, an online-offline club for lifelong learners who want to continue connecting, reinventing, and impacting the world. She's a sustainability expert, getting her master's at Columbia, continuing to learn yet more herself. And let's hear now more from Lesley.